welcome to part 2 of my record collection video. This time we're going to be starting with one of my all-time favorite bands, and I am in a new location testing out the lighting. Hopefully it works a little better than it did before. Still new to this whole thing. Also set up my tracking gimbal. Hopefully that doesn't break down through the video. Seems to be working okay at the moment. Yes, I'm gonna actually make these videos a little bit shorter, I think. The last one was almost an hour. Stick to probably half of the cubbies, and that'll allow me to go into a little bit more detail on some of my favorites, which we'll get into here, and cut down the video time so it's not quite as much of a chore to watch. So let's get into it. As promised, we are beginning with Dream Theater. This is their third album, Awake. This was a special limited edition pressing. This is number 966 out of 3,000. It's pretty cool. I was really wanting to get this on vinyl for a long time, but they were always out of press, and they put out some new ones in this beautiful blue gold mix color. You can see that. This album is definitely up there in terms of Dream Theater albums for me. I wasn't super keen on it when I first got it, but over time it grew on me quite a lot. I really love the atmosphere that Kevin Moore brings to the early Dream Theater stuff. This album in particular is much darker than Images and Words was, which I also need to get one of these days. No songs on here that I don't like. 6 O'Clock is kind of a Christmas anthem for me now, every year at Christmas. At 6 o'clock, of course, it has to be my alarm sound. But yeah, we've got The Mirror and Lie, obviously two classics right there. I really love in The Mirror how like the majority of the song is just one note chugging along. There's also Caught in a Web, that's great. And it's just a really solid album, but not in my top 5, which we'll get into in a second here. But my top 5 Dream Theater albums are the stretch of albums from Metropolis Part 2 through to Systematic Chaos. I really think each one of those is basically perfect, and the fact that they all happen in a row and they all have bits of the I guess not Metropolis, but the 12-step suite on them is it's just incredible that Dream Theater managed to put out so many good albums all in a row. Next up, Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. This is a fantastic album. No bad songs, really cool story that goes through the whole thing, but probably my least favorite of my 5 favorites. I think this is a really solid album. I usually just listen to it all at once. I don't cherry pick songs from it too often. It is overshadowed a little bit by the albums that came after it, for me at least, especially these ones that we'll get into right now. 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. It's really tough, depending on my mood. Either this or Octavarium is my favorite Dream Theater album. This one I do think is their most creative album, their most experimental. I guess it wins over Octavarium slightly with the fact that it has no dud songs on it. I love everything from here. Octavarium has one song that I'm not the biggest fan of, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. This isn't even a side-long song. This is a whole disc-long song. This is two LPs, and the second LP is almost entirely just the last song. It's 45 minutes long. All these are classics. Glass Prison, Blind Faith, Misunderstood. Misunderstood is quite possibly their most out there song that they've ever done. I really wish one day they would try something like that again, just experimenting with all those different sounds. A lot of Beatles influence on that track in terms of production choices. One of my favorite albums just in general. And probably the one that I come back to the most. It has a lot of re-listening value. Up next we have Train of Thought. Probably it is their heaviest album. They went into it with that goal in mind of just creating a really metal album. I do tend to prefer Dream Theater when they're on their more prog rock side rather than the prog metal side, but this album's the exception. This is just so heavy. Some great riffs on here. Every song is great. Favorite is probably either In the Name of God or Honor Thy Father. Yeah, it is hard to choose. Probably third third or fourth favorite Dream Theater album. It was really hard to rank them. My tastes change depending on the day, all the time. Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on this album. This is Octavarium, which we were talking about before. Let's get into a little bit of history. This was the first full Dream Theater album that I heard. This would have been back in, I think I discovered in 2009, 2008, somewhere around there. I was still in middle school. I remember hearing Panic Attack. My friend showed me that, and it was a really, really cool riff in there, great bass line. Kind of liked it immediately. At the time, I was listening mostly to Metallica, Megadeth. Actually, I don't even know if I got into Megadeth yet. A little bit of Coheed and Cambria. Not a huge repertoire of things that I was into at the time. So this was kind of really out there for me. I had never heard anything quite like this before, and it really blew me away. I remember looking on the iTunes store back then and seeing that Octavarium was a 24-minute long song. And I'm like, that can't be right. No song's 24 minutes long. What are they going to do? So I immediately tried to go listen to it, and I couldn't find it anywhere for whatever reason. This was back, we still had LimeWire at that point. That's how I was acquiring music. Tried to find the entire album, and I downloaded it through LimeWire. It took a little while because our connection was very slow. When I listened to it, it was clearly the same singer, but not the same songs that I heard on iTunes. And I tracked down the correct album not too long after that, but it took me many years to figure out that the one that I had downloaded originally was the renamed James LaBrie solo album, Elements of Persuasion. Someone had just changed all the track names to Octavarium titles. Yeah, I just heard the entire wrong album. After I did eventually hear the actual Octavarium song, which takes up the entire side of the second record here, it blew me away, to be honest. It completely changed my entire outlook on music in general. It was at that point that I decided I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to strive towards something like that. Nothing else had ever intrigued me that much. And to be honest, I don't know if anything else ever has since. Even all the great stuff that I've heard, nothing has quite lived up to Octavarium. I don't listen to it as much as I used to these days, but I do still throw it on and enjoy it just as much as I did the first time. Everything else on this album, aside from that, is also amazing. The only one on here, and again, it's not a bad song by any means, it just kind of brings the album down slightly for me. It's a bit of a dip in quality, would be The Answer Lies Within. I know I Walk Beside You as a pick for a lot of people for being a weaker track on this as well. I quite like it though. I think it's a pretty catchy, nice little track. But The Answer Lies Within, again, good song. It just brings down the energy of the album for me, and it just doesn't resonate with me like everything else on here does. Possibly, if I had to pick one album to only listen to for the rest of my life, it'd probably be this. Mostly because of that last song. So unfortunately, I don't have Systematic Chaos. I didn't quite complete the run of 5 albums that I think are their best work. So the next one that I have is Dramatic Turn of Events. I remember being so excited when this album came out because this was the first album that was released. I guess I must have discovered Dream Theater in 2009, because I discovered them right after Black Clouds and Silver Linings came out. So this was the first one that released where I was already a fan. This was the first one I got to experience at release with all the hype surrounding it, especially with Mike Mangini playing on this and the whole build-up they had towards finding a new drummer, the documentary that they put out, all the press they were getting at the time. This album was a big deal when it came out. I think it holds up. The production on here is a little not to my taste. I do think it actually kept getting worse as their newer albums went on, but it was still acceptable on here. The drums were kind of not great sounding, but the songs on here really hold up. The only one I don't like is Build Me Up, Break Me Down. It's too angsty for me, and I appreciate what they were going for, and I appreciate the experimentation there, stepping out of their comfort zone a little bit. Just didn't work for me. But everything else on here is a great song. I love it all. Beneath the Surface actually is one of the very, very few songs that actually made me cry the first time I heard it. Beautiful melody, some really sad lyrics. Really, really hit high school aged me. But yeah, we've got Lost Not Forgotten, we've got Bridges in the Sky, Outcry, and Breaking All Illusions. All just really great, over 10-minute songs. Dream Theater classics in my eyes. And I really like the album cover too. The self-titled Dream Theater album. I was really excited when this came out. I guess this would have been 2013 this was released. So just a couple years after the last one, Dream Theater seemed to be on a roll, refreshed sounding, and yeah, I thought their last album was brilliant, so I was super excited for this one. And when it came out, I did like it quite a bit. I didn't like the first single, The Enemy Inside. I thought it was kind of underwhelming. Not bad, I guess, just kind of boring. But then when I got the whole album, I did enjoy it. I liked it quite a bit. But I can't really listen to it now because the production on here is god-awful. This is probably the worst sounding album that I've ever heard, except for maybe Death Magnetic by Metallica. Honestly, as much as Saint Anger sounds like a terrible album, I think it sounds better than this album. The production, snare aside, is raw. This is just so overproduced, so compressed, so flat. There's no dynamics, there's no bass, it's just I don't like it. That said, the songs on here are still great. You've got the False Awakening suite, which is an excellent intro to the album and to their shows. I think they opened both of the shows that I've seen with that song. The Looking Glass is a nice little tribute to Rush. Enigma Machine, not one of my favorite Dream Theater instrumentals, but it's okay. The Bigger Picture, I think, is also them trying to be Rush, but I don't think they pull it off quite as well. It is a nice song, but not as good as I feel it could be. But Behind the Veil and Illumination Theory are the big ones for me on here. Illumination Theory is still a great song, I feel. I just really wish that this album was not marred so much by the awful production choices. I don't know what they were thinking when they made this. This is by far, the worst sounding Dream Theater album out there, and they have some pretty interesting sounding albums. If you can make it past that, if you're not much of a production buff and you don't care about that sort of thing, this is still a solid album. Just a bit of a letdown for their self-titled, supposed big masterpiece. I definitely don't think it's aged as well as some of their other stuff. So that's the end of Dream Theater. That's all the records I have of theirs right now. I'm always looking to expand my collection, obviously. I guess we'll get into some other bands here. Electric Light Orchestra. This is El Dorado, one of their pretty much universally acclaimed albums. A lot of good songs on here. Can't Get It Out of My Head is great. I don't have too much to say about this album. It really is just an enjoyable experience from start to finish. It's ELO are like one of those bands that are kind of on the fringe a lot of the time, sort of progressive rock, sort of just kind of pop rock. This is one of their slightly more progressive albums, I think. But either way, whether they're trying to be a little bit more complex or they're just rocking out on some catchy tunes, I really enjoy these guys. And Jeff Lynne is a genius when it comes to songwriting and production. We have the very famous Out of the Blue, a double album, also really great. There's not really any songs on here I don't like. It's a solid good time through the whole thing. It's got classics on it like Mr. Blue Sky and Turn to Stone. I actually got this for I think like $2 in a bargain bucket at a thrift shop, and this was the first ELO album that I ever heard. Just because of that. Kind of turned me into a fan immediately. I remember putting this on in my basement. Really enjoying listening to the whole thing for the first time. I haven't listened to it in a while though. I should probably get on that. Listen to more ELO. Here we have Discovery. One of my favorites of theirs. Because this is the album that has Don't Bring Me Down on it. Which is as basic of a pick as it is my favorite ELO song. It's so catchy. Really solid album. Another bargain bin find. These guys are pretty common to run across. Now this one I had to actually search for a little bit. I did find it once. This is Time, tied with Discovery for my favorite album. I found it once and I didn't know what it was. I just thought the cover art was cool, but I passed it up because I didn't have a lot of money. And then for years I was trying to find it after I had heard it, and I could never find it anywhere. I finally did manage to get my hands on it somewhere down in the States, I think, when I went on a record shopping trip. This is a concept album. It's funny because I don't think it's very much of a prog album, but by virtue of being a concept album and just some of the strange instrumentation they have going on, I do feel like it definitely counts as an honorary prog album. Also, this is one of the few non-Beatles anything, really, that my dad enjoys. He listens to The Lights Go Down so much. It's actually really annoying. Secret Messages, which was the follow-up to Time. Almost as good, I do put it a little bit below the last two albums there. I do feel like it dips in quality slightly as we get to the second side, but the first side is just straight gold. Here we get into something a little more obscure. This is German progressive rock band Eloy. I believe this was their fourth album, Ocean. This one's kind of weird because it's this way, but it opens this way. It kind of bugs me. I actually saw this album in a record store years and years ago, and I thought it was super cool. I was like, oh, that looks like it could be a progressive rock band that I would enjoy, but I didn't think to look it up at the time, and I never bought it. A few years later after that, I did hear the first song on here, Poseidon's Creation, and it had everything that I liked in a band. There was great bass lines. There was really cool little ambient guitar riffs. The keyboards were everywhere, very atmospheric, sometimes in your face. The vocals took a little bit of getting used to just because of his very thick German accent. But once you get over that, it didn't take me very long. Vocals are not the main draw for me for music, so it didn't hinder me too bad. Just like a little bit of adjustment to get used to his pronunciation. But really good album. I think it slightly dips on the second last song. I enjoy a little bit less, but it's only got 4 songs, 2 per side. Would definitely recommend this album to pretty much anyone if you enjoy bass and synthesizers, which are my 2 main things. Another Eloy album, Planets. This is, I believe, the start of their 80s material, if I'm not mistaken. It doesn't say on here what the date is. Either 80s or very late 70s. This is actually it has like a twin album that's called Time to Turn, which I would very much like to get as well. They have similar album art. This one, they have variant covers. This is the one that I managed to order from Germany. Had to definitely track these ones down online because since I saw that first copy of Ocean, I've never seen them in a store again. Through their whole career, bass and synthesizers are the 2 main instruments. So they really are like a tailor-made band for my tastes. But these, you can tell that they go a little more 80s on this. The songs get a little bit shorter, but definitely still progressive. Definitely still sound like the same band. They just streamline it a little bit and make it a little bit more synth-heavy. But no complaints from me. Colors. This one might be my favorite Eloy album. I have heard all of them. I just don't have them all on record yet. As I said, they are hard to find. Had to ship these ones over from Germany. Which actually, worth mentioning, all the German records that I have, the cardboard is weirdly flimsy. I don't know if that's just a thing in Germany, but they're very, very thin cardboard, very wobbly. It's just interesting. I have some Genesis records from Germany too, and they're the same kind of cardboard. This has Child Migration on it, which I think is possibly their best song. Great grooves. I really liked their 80s stuff quite a bit. Now, up next, we get into another big one of the prog world. It's probably going to be a couple bands per video that I get into a little bit more in depth. Dream Theater was the first one here. The second one is going to be Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This is their first self-titled album. Knife Edge might have been the first song that I heard. But yeah, this album is pretty much great all the way through. A little on the short side. I wish it was a bit longer, but some of those older albums were like that. And I shouldn't talk. Our first album was pretty short too. I think it is actually shorter than this one still. Classics on here. Lucky Man, of course, was one of their hits. Emerson, Lake and Palmer are a funny band for me because I guess in theory I probably shouldn't like them that much. They're very technical, classical, which I don't usually like as much. But for whatever reason, they still manage to speak to me. I think it's probably Keith Emerson's keyboard playing. But to be honest, they're all really good. The band members themselves always seemed a little arrogant, especially reading interviews with Carl Palmer lately. He seems to be on a bit of a high horse, which is unfortunate. But Keith Emerson, one of my heroes. Greg Lake, gorgeous voice. Such a mellow tone, but can still give energy when he needs it. Really underrated bass player too. He did guitars and bass for most of ELP's stuff. So they rarely show up at the same time on any of these albums. He's either taking a break, playing guitar in a quiet section, or playing bass, romping along with the crazy keyboards. I also disagree with most people when it comes to ELP, because I feel like most people think that they kind of plateaued or aren't really worth listening to. Once Love Beach came along, I feel like people were done with them. But I actually really enjoy most of their albums, which we will see here in a second. So next up is Tarkus, a absolute masterpiece and true classic. The songs on the second side are all a little fun. Some of them are kind of jokey. These guys do that sometimes. They usually have the big serious piece and then a few other little silly songs thrown in. I think this was the second album that I heard. I can't remember if I listened to them all in order or not, but this album is definitely not for the faint of heart, because it's mostly just keyboards doing for 45 minutes. This one here, I think, is my favorite ELP album. This is Trilogy. Funnily enough, the first copy of this I ended up buying had the label for their first album on the disc, but the music itself was still the right album. It was still Trilogy. I don't know what I ended up doing with that. I think I might have given it to a friend. Hard to remember. But I did end up getting a second copy of it that was normal, so I knew what songs were playing. Endless Enigma, parts 1 and 2 all together. Probably my favorite ELP song. Hoedown on here is a favorite for me as well. Just that synth nonsense. This early on, it wasn't really anything like it at the time, and I still think it holds up pretty well. Definitely set the stage for a lot of the stuff that was to come later. Yeah, probably my favorite one. My second favorite one, Brain Salad Surgery. Again, a lot of people on here, Carnival 9, the main half-hour-long song that's on here, is usually considered one of their best works, but I feel a lot of people don't enjoy the shorter songs on here too much. Toccata was actually another study song for us in college. I don't remember what specifically it was supposed to be demonstrating. I just remember being like, hey, I know that song. This is good. Everyone else was like, what the heck is going on here? This also has Still You Turn Me On, which is a hilarious song. Yeah, this one's got a cool gatefold opening to that extra picture, but no track list or anything. I think Benny the Bouncer's on here too, which is an enjoyable tune. I've got their live album, which I won't go into too much depth on. It's just a live album. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Really good track list. This has got the full Carnival 9 song on it. It's got all of Tarkus too. Wow. Yeah, really good live album. It's just they play well. The recording quality is decent. I think I'd probably pick this up again somewhere for $2 or $3 in a bargain bucket somewhere. I'm not usually too big on live albums, but sometimes you get a good one. That's definitely one of them. We've got Works Volume... I don't know why they're mixed up, but we got Works Volume 2. Not a lot of people's favorite here with Works Volume 2, but it's got a lot of songs that I love on it. I really enjoy this album, especially I Believe in Father Christmas, another Christmas classic for me. I have to listen to that every morning, or not every morning, every year at Christmas in the morning. Brain Salad Surgery is fun. Tiger in a Spotlight. Close But Not Touching. It's another good one. Also, So Far to Fall. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like people overlook slightly later albums for no real reason. I think these are pretty solid. Not as proggy, not as crazy. We got Works Volume 1, which is a double album. And this album's interesting because each side is kind of solo compositions of the three band members, and then the last side is all together. Or is it the first side? I don't remember. One of the sides is all of them together as a band, and the other ones are all just their solo compositions. They still play together as a band, but it's like written only by that one member on those sides. It's pretty cool. Fanfare for the Common Man is on here. Tank is on here, nice drum solo. My favorite is probably side 2, Greg Lake's stuff, just because there's a lot of really good songs on here. C'est la vie, one of my favorites. Hallowed Be Thy Name is also good. Closer to Believing is good. Now we have everyone's favorite, Love Beach. This album, I would not say it's bad by any stretch of the means, actually. It has another 20-minute long song on it. A lot of people think they sold out on this. I don't think they did. I just don't think it feels very inspired. I listened to it, and I'm kind of just... Can't say that I dislike it, but I can't say that I really enjoy it all that much either. Which is funny, because usually a 20-minute song will grab me just like that, but this one, not so much. That's it that I have for ELP on record. I do enjoy quite a bit their later albums as well, especially In the Hot Seat, which I've recently learned that a lot of people really hate, but I don't think they even make that on vinyl. Anyway, on to the next band. We have FM. I heard this on a radio station somewhere. Actually, I think it was in Nelson on the Co-op radio station. Cal, for his prog rock show, which I've been on a couple times, he played an FM song, and I was like, oh, that's a really cool song. And then I ended up finding the record sometime later. I think it was, Phasers on Stun, which of course is a Star Trek reference. I have to appreciate that as a massive Star Trek fan. But this is a, good album. Solid stuff. Would definitely recommend it to people. Little shorter songs. Well, I guess Black Noise at the end is 10 minutes. A worthy addition to any collection. I think they're also a Canadian band too, which is always nice. We have another album here, Surveillance by FM. To be honest, I don't remember this one as much. I'm going to need to listen to it again. It's been a little while. Found it in a bargain bucket somewhere. Recognized the name FM from the other one that I had. I do remember enjoying it quite a bit. It's just, I think I've only listened to it once or twice. There's just so much music to get through, you know? Focus. Mother Focus. Focus are a fun band. A little more on the sort of funky, fusion-y side. Not a favorite for me by any means, but a good jam every now and then. We get into Foreigner here, which is funny. Not a lot of people, I think, would expect to have this in a collection like mine. But I really, really, really like this band, and I feel they are pretty underrated, especially this first album. Star Rider on here is basically like a Pink Floyd song. It's really good, and Lou Graham's voice on this is incredible. He's a really, really great singer. I have seen these guys live once. I saw them with Styx and Loverboy, which is quite the blast from the past show. But they were really good still. Lou Graham wasn't with them. There was I forget who their singer is now, but he did really well. I didn't notice that the voice was different until about halfway through the set. Lots of hits on here. Feels Like the First Time, Cold as Ice, Star Rider, Head Knocker. A really solid band that I don't feel gets appreciated enough. We've got, this one is Double Vision. They have a lot of hits on each album. Don't know if I'd say this one's one of my favorites, but it is still pretty solid. We have Four, probably their biggest, best known album. Jukebox Hero on it, Waiting for a Girl Like You. Yeah, I mean, those are their two biggest hits, I think. This one is going to be our last one for this video. It is Overnight Sensation by Frank Zappa. Currently the only Zappa album that I have. Still the only one that I've heard in full, thanks to one of my friends gifting this to me, because he just was like, you have to hear Frank Zappa, and I kept putting it off because there's just so much. I didn't know where to start. Really good album. I loved this. I think it was 50-50 is my favorite song on here. They are all really good, though. The lyrics are funny, and most of his stuff that I've heard, it doesn't take himself too seriously. He has a lot of really cool... I mean, I've watched lots of interviews with him. He has a lot of cool opinions on music. But yeah, really good album. Need to get into more. Just as I said, money and time. If I didn't have to work, but still had a lot of money, all I would do is buy records and listen to them constantly. Anyway, that's it for this video. This is about halfway through my second little cubby of records here. I think we're going to be getting into Genesis next time. That'll be lots to say about Genesis, at least. So again, thanks for tuning in. If you made it all the way through. If not, talking about things you probably don't care about. I guess we'll see you for part 3 here. Ciao.